In the late 90s, wrestling games were starting to become more recognized as a legitimate form of entertainment in the video game market. Thanks to games like WCW NWO Revenge and WCW vs. NWO World Tour on the N64, wrestling games had finally become playable and extremely fun. However, on the PS1 it was a completely different story. PlayStation 1 wrestling games were still completely horrendous and unplayable compared to their N64 counterparts. That's until WWF Smackdown was released in 2000. Smackdown revolutionized wrestling games, making them arcadey and more fun to play. So in this list, I'll show you 5 ways Smackdown innovated in wrestling games in the early 90s and changed the future of wrestling games forever. Back in the early 90s, wrestling games were evolving and becoming slightly better with every year. Acclaim had the video game market and were releasing games like WWF Attitude and ECW Anarchy Rules. These games were fun for their times and aesthetically enticing with real voice actors before matches and a solid presentation for the 90s. However, the gameplay was horrible, requiring you to press button combinations to do something as simple as a suplex. This is why when THQ bought Acclaim, it was such a big deal. Finally, with Smackdown, we had a game with fluid animation and a nice presentation that was actually fun to play. Backstage fighting was huge in the 90s. The hardcore title had just come out and we got some of the most fun matches ever courtesy of the WWF and even WCW. While the first wrestling game to have backstage brawls was WCW Mayhem, the first WWE game to have it was WWF Smackdown. To this day, I remember playing Smackdown and how unique and fun it was to go backstage into so many areas to pin my opponent. Matches would end in creative ways, and ever since fans have wanted this mode to return, making a comeback in many Smackdown vs. Raw and WWE 2K games. According to Unseen64.net, the beta version featured many weapons that weren't normally usable in the first Smackdown game. These weapons included tables, toilet seats, caskets, steel steps, handcuffs, and shopping carts. Caskets wouldn't be used until Smackdown 2. The most interesting weapon on this list, however, are the handcuffs. We've seen handcuffs used in wrestling many times before, but never in a video game. And however, you could only beat your opponent with them, you couldn't actually handcuff them. This is still a very interesting weapon to find in a wrestling game, and one we hopefully get in future installments. In modern wrestling games, they have features such as the ability to have certain wrestlers be able to jump off the top rope or climb a ladder. This was a feature that was frowned upon when it first came out, but did you know the original Smackdown game had a feature very similar to this? Abilities were in Smackdown on PS1, but they were very different than they are today. There weren't as many, but you could use these limited abilities in cool ways. The Rock had a feature called Mankind Plus, which meant during a match, if The Rock was being beaten down, Mankind would interfere in the match to help him out. This was a really cool innovative feature for the time, and just another reason why Smackdown was so revolutionary for wrestling video games. Season Mode was a big addition to wrestling games in 2000 and added replayability to the game in many unique ways. Not only could you go for titles, but the Season Mode was literally unbeatable. You could play it for 40 years in-game time if you wanted to, and believe it or not, you would have to play it for decades of in-game hours if you wanted to unlock everything in the game. There were many exclusive Create a Superstar models you could unlock, many of which would never be in another WWE game. Wrestlers such as Albert, Blue Meanie, Gerald Briscoe, Ivory, Jacqueline, Midian, Pat Patterson, Stephanie McMahon, Stevie Richards, Viscera, and many more. Season Mode isn't the most compelling story mode of the series, but it was a start to something much bigger. Smackdown changed wrestling games forever, and with its help brought us many other exciting wrestling games over the past 18 years. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe, and if there's anything you enjoyed about Smackdown 1 on PlayStation 1, make sure to leave a comment telling me what it is. Thank you for watching.